I want to talk to you about mastering the down market because, well, let's face it, there are three assumptions that I have, and I think one assumption most of you will already agree with me on. But when I look at the multifamily world, and if you, I'm curious because some of you will be already in the multifamily world, some of you maybe have single families, and some of you may be starting. The information I am going to share today, I believe, will be helpful for you regardless of whether you're multifamily or single. First, let me introduce myself, a little bit about myself. Um, there are three or four cool cats on this picture that have been really influential in my life in the last number of years. On the left, you'll see Richard and Ken. They've been partners of mine. I'm part of a company called Legacy. Right in the middle, you'll see Richard and this cool cat called Patrick Francie. He's wearing a jacket. I think that picture, Patrick, is from about 6 months or 9 months ago when you were here in Toronto speaking for us. And then I also had the opportunity to work with Grant Cardone. Some of you will know Grant. I worked for him because of Richard's connections there for about 2 years. We built out his global licensing program. Now, what I do is I'm really a leadership guy more than anything else. I'm a leadership guy, and so what I do in leadership is it shows up for me in a couple different areas. One is in real estate. So I'm the chief leadership officer for a very bespoke small group called the Real Estate Wealth Lab. I do a lot of real estate coaching, mentoring, and partnerships. I have a company called Ascension Principal, which is primarily a leadership development, a self-development company that does one-on-one coaching for entrepreneurs. If you scan that QR code, it'll give you some more information about me. Okay, now let's get down to what we're talking about here today. There are three assumptions that I have that I need you to be aware of. First assumption is that Canada's challenge is primarily economic. What I mean by that is that, I have conversations almost every week with people who say, when the interest rate drops another 0.25%, things will come back. Oh, I know things are tough right now, but wait for the spring market. Things will come back. And I keep having this conversation where it's two different stories that are going on. Because the story that I have, or what the belief that I have, is that the reason why we are where we are at is not because of interest rates. It's not because of all these other things. It is primarily because our economy is broken. It's staggering along, and we need a fix on the economy. And on the outside, we look like we're all put together. Politicians do what politicians do. People say what people say. On the outside, we look like we are in the three-piece suit. We've got it all together. But on the inside, underneath, what I'm seeing is the economy really struggling to keep up. We're in this holding place where we're on the verge of recession. I won't go into the area that Patrick will be speaking to you about. But my primary underlying belief, Canada is economically not good. Secondly, I also have a belief that the opportunity in this market, given the political climate or the political policies, given the economic health of our country, given the chaos that seems to be ensuing and happening, the opportunity will really boil down to management and innovation. How you are going to manage your properties through this downturn and this down period is going to speak heavily to how you're going to end up or survive this season. And through this part of real estate investing and businesses, I believe you're going to see a lot of innovative thinking, and not just thinking, but application. Sometimes we have the idea, but we haven't applied it yet. Third, real estate, I still believe, is a long-term, it's strong long-term place to keep your money. It will preserve wealth and grow your wealth. Uh, Patrick can speak more to this. In fact, Patrick, I think you're one of the few people that speak so clearly about the negative repercussions of holding your money in cash. Cash, we say, is king. Yes, you need a little bit of cash, but too much of cash is not king. It's burning. It's like having a bucket full of water and with a hole at the bottom that's dripping out constantly. So I think real estate is still, if well placed, well managed, is still a strong place to place your capital, not for the present, but for the future. So welcome to the new reality. Do you remember? I'm not sure whether you've had this experience or not, but I have, because I talk to everything that moves. I will get into a taxi in Brampton. I will get into an Uber in Toronto. And I will have the Uber driver give me real estate advice on what to buy, where to buy, and who to partner with. I will have people give me recommendations on how to renovate the property because they've binge watched some HGTV show. That era is over. It used to be that if you bought anything with brick and mortar, you looked like a winner because everything was going up. And people mistakenly took the brilliance and the momentum of the economy to be equal to their own brilliance and their own execution of management. In fact, 5 years ago, you didn't have to do a lot of good management. If you just bought a property, you were going to make money. Investors today are hoping for the normal to come back. Not come back like 2-3 years from now, but in the next 6 months. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we are going to be at a struggling point for the next few years. So the time is now to clarify systems, put on big boy pants, be adult about this, have conversations, and let the stories we hold on to that drive our mindset, just hold on to them a little bit looser so that you can enter a new realm of possibility. So for this talk, I want to give you a framework to think about. You know, I grew up in the country of Sri Lanka. Some of you will know it, some of you won't. It's an island off the coast of India. Now, I was one of those kids that had a love affair with any animal. It did not matter. So I smuggled into the house spiders, bugs. I had rhinoceros beetles in my pocket. I used to go to school I had to wear like a uniform to school, and I would hide in my body my pet squirrel. So I was that guy. I was a bit like Mowgli, if you get my drift. Well, spider webs and spiders always fascinated me because even as a teenager, as I was growing up, I would notice that spiders would create their web one morning. And if you went and poked at one of the strands, it would get the spider's attention. It would go running over there or it would check it out. If a strand broke because of the weather or I broke it, within a little bit of time, it would repair it. These load-bearing strands held up the web. And it is the best picture I can give you for what managing a multifamily is going to look like for you in the next few years. It is not a matter of doing all the things. It is not a matter of executing on everything and having a checking the boxes off to get everything done. Instead, it's a little bit more felt than telt, so to speak. It's sitting in the center of your web and feeling these load-bearing strands and feeling the temperature and what is happening economically in your building, and then being able to adjust to each of these principles from the center. So let me unpack for you some of these principles. First, let me go to the center of the web, what I call the center of the web. I call it, the center is NOI, net operating income. Now, net operating income is not all your income. It is your gross income minus all the operating income, except for the money that you use to pay the mortgage with. So this is operating expenses are things like your hydro, your heat, your repairs. Those are all operating income. When you remove operating income from your gross income, you end up with a number called, that we in the multifamily world called net operating income. Now, net operating income, or NOI, is crucial for maintaining a healthy debt service coverage ratio, which measures your property's eligibility and ability to cover its debt obligations. It actually anchors the value of your property. If you want to know what a building is worth, you've got to figure out what the net operating income is to figure that out. And then what happens is you divide that by this number called cap rate. Now, I'm not going to get into cap rate today, but for our conversation, just pretend it's a magic number that is slightly different depending on the type of apartment building and the neighborhood that you're in. And your mortgage broker should be able to tell you what range of a net operating cap rate your building is in. So let's look at net operating income for a minute. Let's assume, and this is just, I just want to bring people up to a level playing field so that we can continue. Let's assume for a minute you've got a building. Well, let's say it's 20 units. And let's say your net operating income is $100,000. Let's assume that your cap rate is 5%. If your net operating income is $100,000, you did take the 100,000 divided by 5%, guess what? You've got the value of the building. That building is worth $100,000. Now, let's assume that you buy this building and somehow by hook or by crook or by some methodology that you execute on, you're able to increase that your net operating income by $20,000. Guess what? You've just pushed the value of that building up by 20,000 from 100,000 from 100K to 120,000K. You brought about $20,000 worth of value by increasing your net operating income. Now, remember I said we're in a down market. In a down market, you got a job to do. This is your job. Your job is to protect your asset. It is to protect it and push the NOI up until the cycle changes. Down markets will bring down values of the building. The reason for that is because, well, cap rates expand. So, and then at the same time, your rents start to decrease. So when those two things happen, the value of the building starts to come down. Now, I've found that in multifamily, it does not come down as fast or as aggressively as in single family homes because most multifamily owners are sophisticated and we know how to play the game and wait it out. But your job, whether it's a single family or a multifamily, is to protect your NOI. And if you can find ways to push the NOI up in a down market, you get to keep the building at the same evaluation or make it grow a little bit more. This is not the time to get massive returns. You know why? Because we're in a down market. That's what it means to be in a down market. It means that you're not going to get the returns that you were hoping for 5 years ago. Now, there's 7 strands that I want you to look at. The first one is top line revenue expansion. So in a down market, you want to bring in your top line revenue or your gross income. Now, one of the ways that normal or most operators in the multifamily space look at this is just increasing their rent. They look at how can we have tenant turnover? How can we get a higher rent? How can we do all these things? Well, that's one way to do it, but that's not enough in a down market, especially when rents are declining. So you're going to have to do something else to actually work and manage your property and find other sources of revenue. It's amazing to me that when I talk to small multifamily investors, how many of them don't charge for parking separately? They roll it all into the rent. Um, we bought a building for about $850,000 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We just sold it for 2.5 mil. One of the first things we did on that building is that there were only 6 parking spots for it. First thing I did, I got parking all painted and labeled. Why? Because every time there was a tenant turnover, parking was added to the rent at $50. What that does, especially in a down market, is that it increases your cash flow because you're going to need it. Look at Wi-Fi. In some areas, you've got to do your research on this. In some areas, you can get high-speed internet that you can purchase from a provider for the entire building, and then be able to meter it out and have people pay into that to be part of that. In some areas, you can put in vending machines. If you have vending machines, if you put that in, you can increase your revenue. Short-term furnished rentals. There's a number of different ways, and we could have a whole discussion on increasing top-line revenue in this market. But one of the things I want to, an easy way to do this, or an easier way to do this, is to do upgrades that increase NOI. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how am I going to bring about an upgrade when we've got tenants in the property? We can't just increase their rent, especially in provinces like Ontario, where there's landlord and tenant board, very strict rules. Well, one of the things that I've found is if you could find one thing that a tenant would really, really like and add that to them and then increase the rent. And there's specific paperwork that you will need to speak to your legal counsel and your property manager to make sure that you get those signed and filed. It changes from province to province. Make sure you follow all that. But so what I want to do here is, like, sometimes we have painted a unit and offered it to, or cleaned up a unit slightly and offered it to a tenant to move in for a little higher rent. But a simple fix is, if let's say you bought a building, and let's say your building is 20 units, and then in that building, you notice that there are no dishwashers. So when you do your inspection, you figure out that the electrical is there and the plumbing is not going to take a lot of work. There's space where you can put in dishwashers. So you go to your tenants and you make them an offer. Like in the words of Godfather, you make them an offer they can't refuse. You give them, you offer them, hey, would you like a dishwasher put into your unit? It's going to cost you, and let's say it's $100. Sometimes it's $50, sometimes it's $100 more in rent. And let's assume that out of the 20 units, only 10 of the units say yes to that. That means that in 10 units, you've caused $100 more of rent to come in. My math here is actually slightly, no, it's $1,000 more per month for that 10 units. That is correct. That's $12,000 more in rent that you've generated. But that's not the big win. Now, we're going to assume that it's going to cost you $2,000 to put in the dishwasher in those 10 units. Are you still tracking with me? Rose, I can see you. Are you still tracking with me? You're with me? Give me a thumbs up. Good, awesome, perfect. So 20 unit building, half the units say yes to your dishwasher. You're going to charge them $100 more in rent after you install the dishwasher. It's going to cost you for the entire 10 units, $20,000 to do this. You're going to raise your overall rent by $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year. Now, Your NOI, remember, you're going to have expenses. All the income that comes in has an allocated amount that goes away to expenses. So for our discussion here, I took it to be 40%. If a building is running well in certain areas, you may be able to get it at 35%. Thomas Buyer could probably do that. And if you're starting a building and you're just entering it, it's going to be a whole lot more, especially in Ontario. But let's assume here, I'm making the assumption that 40% goes out, so 60% is kept. So 12,000 multiplied by 60% gives you $7,200. This means you've increased your NOI by $7,200. You know what that means? That means that you've increased the value of that building by $144,000. Now, in a down market, cash flows are tight. Your building is losing value. You do this, what you've done is you push the value of the building up again. You forced it up. Expense strand two. So on one side, you're looking to ways to increase your revenue. On the other side, you're looking at ways to reduce your expenses. Now, this is not the time for you to flex your muscle and do all the crazy renovations you've always wanted to do in your multifamily. This is the time to exercise discipline and have what I would call a spending framework. Before stuff happens, have a framework for questions that you will ask yourself to see if this is a renovation that needs to be done now, later, or way in the future. Well, one of the things that you can do to reduce your cost is sub-metering. Now, sub-metering can be done with gas, it can be done with electricity, it can be done with water. What we have found, one of my partners, Stephen Scott's actually on this call, what Stephen and I have found in a couple of our buildings is that sub-metering for electrical seemed to make sense. And in two of our buildings, there are 16 unit and 12 unit buildings, we're able to save about $7,000 by sub-metering it out. And so what happens in that is that we get each unit has its own meter. We're not putting in a new electrical meter. It's digitally metered. And then we can take that amount, the tenant can pay that amount. As a result, our NOI increases because our debt drops, increasing the value again. LED lighting is just such a simple fix to increase your NOI. You can employ a tenant to do cleaning. Now, in a multifamily world, you've got to be really careful when you employ a tenant. Make sure you have the proper insurance set up. Okay? You need to talk to your insurance provider, make sure you have proper extra liability coverage for things like that. Third, tenant retention. Remember in the old days, we wanted tenants to vacate so we could bring up the bring the unit up to the new rental amount. In these days where rents are dropping, your cheapest unit is the one that does not turn. You want tenant retention. You want to be like the mortgage company that 6 months before your mortgage becomes due, they start poking you and tagging you. And a few months before, they start sending you information. And then all of a sudden, they have phone calls you get from the mortgage company sounding very friendly, telling you how they want to reward you for your being their client and how they've got a great rate. And you get to negotiate back and forth because they want to keep your mortgage, not let it go anywhere else. You and I need to do the same thing. We should always be doing this, but this is something that is crucial in a down market. You have to provide, if you can provide incentives for not just leaving, you want to provide incentives for leaving for the tenants that are terrible, that are destroying the place. And you all know every multifamily has one or two of those. But you want to have incentives for people who are staying as well. Now, fourth strand, you still tracking with me? These are all things for you to put in your toolkit for you to keep your eye on. It doesn't mean you do every one of these things all the time in every multifamily, but look for where the opportunity is and create it. Community creation, Recently, I did something. I went shopping for a condo, not for myself, but for my parents. And you know what I found interesting? When you walk into a condo, there are some condos you walk into, you walk in through the common area, you go over to the elevator, you push the button, you get into the elevator, it goes up to the floor, you get out, you walk over, you find the number of the condo you're looking at, you open the door, and then you walk in, and you are in a possible future home in that condo. And then there are other condos, other buildings, where you drive into the parking lot and it starts to kind of sing to you. And then you open the front door and you walk into the common area and it's like, whoa, this feels like a hotel. This feels nice. It's welcoming. And you walk inside and you pass other tenants and people are friendly. It smells clean and fresh. What happens is that you feel like you got home before you even enter the condo, the building. What I found about these buildings is when I talked to people that live there, is that they loved being there because of the feeling of community. Think about this. Our world, is it not fragmented? Does it not feel like you can't go to a party and have conversations without there being something under the surface or some friction that can pull people apart? People are so connected in this age, but at the same time they are so starving for community. People like you and I, we step out of our comfort zone. We join groups like Rain. We show up at meetings. We create and attract a community around us. But most people don't. Your tenants, most of them don't. What would it look like if in your rental property, it felt more like a condo? It felt more like a high-end hotel. You don't have to spend all the money to do that. Simple things: cleanliness, safety, the feeling of safety. Not that it's just safe, but the feeling of safety. And the third one is what I call vibe. I don't know how else to express it. It's this feeling you get when you walk in. The you want to create that. Secondly, you want small signals um, of care, because culture matters to people. So figure out ways for you to create culture and connection, not just with your tenants, but help tenants create connections with each other. You know, one of the things that I used to do when I first started years ago, when I first started in the apartment building in the rental industry, and then I stopped a few months in because it became too much work. And now we are looking at starting it up again, only because the times call for it. And that is to have some kind of a newsletter that goes out, not to my investment partners, not to the people that want to hire me as a coach or something like that, but to my tenants. And something that talks about things that are important to them. Maybe there could be a little blurb on budgeting. Maybe there could be a little blurb on parenting. Something that just helps to create a level of community. The third thing that you have to do in community creation is really empower your property manager. No property management company is perfect. If they were, the moment they partnered up with you, they stopped being perfect. So what you want is you want to analyze your property management company, see what their strengths are, allow them to run with it, see what their weaknesses are, and then you step up as the asset manager to handle what is missing. So you're not driving them to do something they're not good at. You step that game up and create that. The I will go through the last few quite quickly. Local perks and partnerships. Down markets hurt the not just investors, they're hurting all the small businesses around your apartment building. Why don't you set up some partnerships with them? What would it look like if the local coffee shop was to give away a free coffee coupon that you could give to your tenants. And as a result of that, maybe 10 or 20% of your tenants started visiting that coffee shop. Find ways for local businesses around you to partner with you in some way. What you have in a multifamily world is you have a client base of clients that you can help by connecting them to other businesses in your area. It starts creating good relationship between businesses and between your clients. It provides something unique to businesses around you and to your tenants. And what this does is it allows you to be the type of player that other people want to rent from because you're different from everybody else. Strand 6, this is not so much about the apartment building, but it is about investor alignment. Few years ago, when like everything I've done, all my properties, I have only one property, my personal residence, that does not have a partner in it. Everything else, I have joint venture partners. I run an LPGP. I have a group of investors. There's always partners involved. One of my specialties has been being able to create really good partnerships. But what I found in the last little while is that calm capital needs clarity and a sense of cadence in the conversation. Because what's happening is that my partners are hearing all kinds of noise. And so what happens is that I've found that what the communicating that I used to do is no longer effective, not because of the content of my communication, but because of the frequency of my communication. What you have to do is increase not just the content, not just the quality, but the quantity. So reset expectations with your investors. The expectations they had when they entered your property or your partnerships 4 years ago is different from what you will get today. Reset the expectations and create strategy over drama. Everybody has an opinion, and it's all driven by some belief, and a number of your partners will be driven by a belief that will be structured by fear. You have to get in there and speak to that. And what you will find is that when people are afraid, they will move to a position of speaking a lot and being highly opinionated about something, because the act of holding the opinion gives us the illusion of control. What you have to do as a sophisticated investor, a leader in the community, is get into that conversation, hear everything that's coming at you without responding in a negative fashion, without being defensive, and then start to have the conversation of what is actually happening and what the strategy is, because that will calm everybody down. Last strand, finally, tech, AI. This tech and AI is moving fast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We could spend a whole presentation just on how to use AI and tech in your multifamily, but modernize really carefully, because everything is coming at you all at once. Choose upgrades that create clarity, lower costs, and attract tenants and capital. One of the things, just on a practical level, that we have found in some of our buildings, we've actually, Stephen Scott, who's a RAIN member, he and I have a couple of properties together, and we were actually able to partner with a business that created EV chargers or install them. And we were able to get them to install one free of charge because they wanted to test the market to see if it would work in an apartment building. For us, it's great. Even though we're not looking to make income off of that. We could do it that way, but that's a different cost profile. But what it does for us is that it allows us to attract a different type of clientele. And I know that because these buildings are in Waterloo, and the type of clientele I'm going to attract are going to have jobs in the tech field. As a result, having an EV charger allows us to be a different type of an apartment building on that street. I think we're the only ones on that street that has that. So, in closing, real estate, you want to do this? It is really, really tough out there. I can tell you that all the conversations that I've had, I can tell you that it's really hard. And if you are struggling, you are finding it difficult, you are not alone. You know, as investors, we are so very good at carrying that burden on us every time we miss something or drop the ball or make a mistake. But we are so poor at congratulating us for the right things that we do. And in times like this, what happens is that the negativity in the market can wear on you as a leader in this community. I understand that. I get that. What you and I need to do in times like this is innovate. It is time to step up and lead better like you have never, ever done before. It is time to have conversations. It is time to think differently. It is time to create and innovate and communicate like you have never done before, because that's what the times call for. And in this time, you step up to lead, you're going to make big changes in the market. So thank you for your time.